That Thanksgiving evening, my son had just come home from the city where he worked as a surgeon. The table was set, the turkey steaming, my husband carving the bird while my grandmother hummed by the fire. For once life felt complete. And then a pair of headlights swept across the yard. I stepped out onto the porch expecting a neighbor, maybe a delivery. But when I saw who climbed out of that old pickup truck, my heart nearly stopped. Two faces I hadn't laid eyes on for over 20 years. My parents. The same people who, at 17, called me a disgrace and threw me out into the January cold while I clutched a duffel bag and a secret I was too young to carry. They were here now, standing in the dusk, their eyes red with tears, asking to meet the grandson they'd once refused to acknowledge. Before I tell you what happened next, let me ask you something. Have you ever been betrayed by the very people who were supposed to protect you? Leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from, because this story is not just about betrayal. It's about survival, about rebuilding, and about what happens when those who broke you come crawling back. My name is Freya, and when I was 16 I thought I had everything figured out. I was quiet, a little shy, but I had dreams tucked away like folded letters. Dreams I only shared with one person. Owen. He was the golden boy at school. A star on the soccer team with a smile that could light up any room. To me, he wasn't just a boyfriend. He was the only one who really saw me. We would sit in the park after classes, whispering plans of moving out, renting a tiny apartment, maybe even starting a business together. I was certain ours was the kind of love that would last forever. But forever ended the autumn after graduation. One October afternoon, under the old oak trees, Owen told me our relationship was holding him back. He said he had big plans, Georgetown, Stanford, a career, and I didn't fit into them. And then he walked away. No glance back, no hesitation. Just like that, the boy who had promised me forever became a ghost. I thought nothing could hurt more than that moment. I was wrong. Because a few weeks later, sitting alone in the upstairs bathroom of my parents' house, I watched 2 pink lines appear on a test strip, and I realized my struggles had only just begun. When that pregnancy test turned positive, my whole world tilted. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, the plastic stick digging into my palm, my hands shaking so hard I thought I'd drop it. 2 pink lines. Proof that my life was no longer just mine. Downstairs, the smell of meatloaf and gravy filled the air. Tuesday dinner like always. My mom's voice called out bright and casual. Freya, dinner's ready, come on. And I knew I couldn't hide it forever. I walked into the dining room, each step heavy like wading through water. My dad sat at the head of the table, glasses sliding down his nose, newspaper open. My mom hovered with a casserole dish, apron streaked with flour. Normalcy everywhere except inside me, where nothing was normal anymore. Mom, Dad, I need to talk to you, I said. My voice cracked, thinner than I wanted. They both looked up, confused, expectant. And then I blurted it out. I'm pregnant. The silence after was louder than any scream. My mom's serving spoon clattered to the floor, gravy splattering across the tablecloth. Her hand flew to her throat as if she couldn't breathe. My dad's face turned a deep, furious red, veins standing out on his temples. Pregnant, my mom shrieked, twisting a napkin into knots. Freya Marie, how could you disgrace us like this? My father shoved his chair back so hard it screeched. He loomed over me, fists clenched. You've ruined your life. Who's the father? That Owen kid. I tried to hold steady, tears stinging my eyes. It's complicated. He's gone. But I can handle this, I swear. My words sounded so small against their fury. My mom's voice rose higher, almost hysterical. Handle it? You're 17. What about school? What about us? The neighbors, the church? Everyone will talk. I didn't mean for this to happen. I shouted back, my chest heaving. You think I wanted this? I'm scared too. But I'm not running away. My dad's bitter laugh sliced through me. You should be scared. You've got no idea what you've done. You are not raising a kid under my roof. End of story. The words hit like a gavel, final and cold. My mom tried to calm him, her voice breaking, but he roared back. She made her bed, now she can lie in it. Get out. I stumbled to my room, numb, my father's words echoing in my skull. Get out. Get out. I dragged out an old duffel bag, stuffing it with sweaters, jeans, a few notebooks. Every creak of the floorboard screamed failure. I paused at my desk, picked up the photo of me and Owen at the county fair. Our smiling faces now nothing but ghosts. I shoved it into the side pocket, not as a keepsake, but as a reminder of what trust could cost. Downstairs, the table was abandoned, food congealing. My mom sat hunched, weeping into a napkin. My dad had barricaded himself in the garage. I stood in the doorway, duffel strap cutting into my shoulder. I'm leaving, I said. My mom looked up red-eyed. Wait, Freya, please. Think about this. Where will you even go? Does it matter? I snapped, hurt spilling out. Dad said I'm not welcome here. You called me a disgrace. What's left to think about? She tried again, her voice breaking. We just need time. But I shook my head. Time's up. I opened the front door. The January night slapped me with icy air, cutting through my thin coat. Snow dusted the lawn, streetlights casting pale shadows. My breath fogged in the dark. I stood there trembling, clutching my bag, utterly alone. And then one name burned in my mind, Grandma Ellena. My father's mother. 2 hours away, in a little brick house with a sagging porch. I hadn't seen her since Christmas, but I still heard her gravelly voice from our last call. You're always welcome here, kid. With numb fingers, I dialed her number. The phone rang twice before clicking. Freya? It's late, what's going on? Her voice was rough but warm, like gravel smoothed by water. And I broke. Grandma, I need to come stay with you. Please, can I come now? There was a pause, then a firm, steady reply. Of course you can. Get here safe, I'll put the kettle on. Hours later, I stepped off the Greyhound bus in Springfield just past midnight. Sneakers crunching frost, duffel heavy on my shoulder. The little brick house glowed at the end of the street, porch light flickering yellow. Before I could knock, the door swung open. Ellena stood there in her quilted robe, silver hair messy, eyes sharp. She took one look at me, tear-streaked, exhausted, and pulled me into her arms. She didn't scold, didn't question. She just held me tight. Come on in, dear. There's always a place for you here. Inside, the house smelled of chamomile tea and cinnamon. It was cluttered, worn but warm. I sank onto the plaid couch, clutching my bag like a lifeline. Minutes later, Ellena returned with mugs of tea and a plate of leftover sandwiches. We ate in silence, the weight of everything pressing down until I finally cracked. Grandma, I whispered, setting down my mug with a shaky clatter. I messed up everything. Mom and Dad, they said I'm not their daughter anymore. And I'm pregnant. I don't know what to do. I'm so scared. Ellena sighed, long and heavy, then leaned forward, her hand steady on my shoulder. Oh, child. People say all kinds of things when they're scared or angry. But listen to me, a child is no disgrace. It's a blessing, even when it's hard. And you're not alone. You've got me. We'll manage, one step at a time. I broke into sobs, but in her words, in her arms, a flicker of hope sparked. For the first time since that night at the dinner table, I believed maybe, just maybe, I could survive this. The weeks that followed in Grandma Ellena's little brick house were both the hardest and the most strangely comforting of my life, because for the first time I wasn't pretending to be fine. I wasn't walking on eggshells. I was just surviving and being held together by a woman who had seen too much life to be shocked by mine. Every morning I would wake up to the creak of her rocking chair in the kitchen and the smell of chamomile tea. And even when my stomach rolled with morning sickness or my mind spun with fear about the future, her steady presence anchored me. She would slide a plate of toast across the table, mutter something about keeping my strength up, and then chatter about her garden or a story she heard on the radio. And I would cling to those ordinary moments like a lifeline. My belly grew slowly, each month a reminder that Owen was gone, that my parents had chosen pride over love, but also that something new was taking shape inside me, something worth every ounce of pain. At night, lying on the plaid couch that sagged under my weight, I would press my hand to my stomach and whisper little promises. I'll fight for you, I'll never leave you, you'll never feel the loneliness I felt. Ellena would overhear sometimes, and instead of teasing she would just nod, her eyes soft, as if she too believed words spoken into the dark had power. When August came, the air sticky and heavy with the kind of heat that made even the roses droop, my body finally gave in. I was rinsing dishes in the cramped kitchen when a sharp pain ripped through me and water gushed down my legs. I froze, panic clawing up my throat, but before I could collapse, Ellena was already there, tossing aside a dish towel, grabbing her keys, her gravelly voice steady. Time to meet this little one, let's go girl. Springfield Mercy Hospital blurred past in a haze of fluorescent lights and antiseptic air. Hours of pain stretched endlessly, contractions tearing through me, and I clung to Elena's hand like it was the only solid thing in the world. She wiped my forehead with a cool cloth, muttering encouragements, telling me to keep breathing, that I was stronger than I thought. And then, with one last push that ripped a scream from my throat, he was here. A tiny boy, slick and squalling, with a shock of dark fluffy hair that glistened under the hospital lights. They laid him on my chest and everything else fell away. I stared down at his scrunched-up face, his impossibly small fists, and something inside me cracked wide open, flooding with a fierce love that drowned every fear. "You're my joy," I whispered through tears, brushing a trembling finger over his tiny hand. And when his fingers curled around mine with surprising strength, I thought my heart might burst. Ellena leaned close, her lined face breaking into a grin I had rarely seen, her voice husky with pride. "Look at that fighter, just like his mama." I laughed, shaky and tear-soaked, but for the first time in months the laughter felt real. I named him Sigd, a name that carried no baggage, no ties to the past, a name that was just his own. The nurses cleaned him, wrapped him, and I couldn't stop staring, memorizing every detail. The flutter of his lashes, the way his lips pursed like he was already dreaming. Fear lingered, yes, but it was braided now with something stronger, resolve. I would raise this child, I would build a life, no matter who had abandoned us. The days and nights that followed were a blur of feedings, sleepless cries, and Ellena bustling around with bottles and blankets. She joked that she hadn't expected to be raising babies again in her 70s, but the way she cradled Sigd, the way her eyes softened when he yawned, I knew she didn't mind. Those first weeks tested me like nothing else. My body ached, exhaustion pressed down, sometimes I cried without knowing why, but every time I thought I couldn't do it, I'd look at Sigd's tiny chest rising and falling, his little fingers curling around mine, and I knew quitting wasn't an option. Slowly life took shape. I found part-time work at Rosie's Diner, a squat little place on the edge of town with cracked vinyl booths, and a jukebox that hadn't worked in years. The owner let me bring Sigd in during slow shifts, setting him up in a second-hand car seat in the back office. Every tip I earned, every crumpled bill, I stashed in a coffee can under my bed labeled Sigd's future. It wasn't much, but it was a promise. At night I would collapse on the couch, cradling him against my chest, whispering about the life I wanted for him. College, choices, the chance to chase dreams I'd never had. He would blink up at me with those hazel eyes, so much like mine, and gurgle as if he understood. Ellena would watch us from her chair, knitting lumpy scarves or sipping tea, and every so often she'd murmur, "We'll manage, kid, we always do." That became our mantra, the thread that stitched the three of us together. There were hard days, of course, days when bills piled up, when the loneliness of single motherhood hit like a wave, when I wondered if I was strong enough. But then Sigd would giggle, or Ellena would tell one of her rough-edged stories about surviving the depression, and I'd find my feet again. One evening, as the cicadas sang outside and the radio hummed low jazz, I rocked Sigd to sleep and realized something vital. The family I thought I'd lost forever had already been replaced by the family I was building. No matter what had been ripped away in this little brick house, with Elena's steady love and Sigd's tiny heartbeat against mine, I had a new beginning. The years moved quickly in that little brick house, each season etching itself into our lives like chapters of a book I never expected to write. And Sigd grew from a squalling infant into a bright-eyed boy whose curiosity filled every corner of the home. By 5 years old he was a whirlwind of questions, asking why birds sang at dawn, how clouds floated above us, why the roses in Ellena's garden bloomed even when the frost lingered on the ground. And Ellena would chuckle from her wicker chair, knitting needles clacking as she answered in her gravelly voice, while I tried to keep up with a child whose mind was always 2 steps ahead. It amazed me how much he wanted to know, how fearlessly he reached into the world for answers. But one sticky summer evening his questions shifted into something heavier, something I had feared since the day he was born. We were sitting on the veranda, the boards creaking under our weight, Ellena rocking back and forth with her half-finished scarf on her lap, the air humming with crickets and the sweet smell of honeysuckle. Sigd sat on the steps, a half-melted popsicle dripping orange onto his fingers, his hazel eyes unusually serious as he turned to me and asked, "Mom, why do all the kids at kindergarten have grandmas and grandpas, but I've only got great-grandma? Where are my other ones?" My breath caught, the words slicing deeper than any childish curiosity had before, because how could I explain rejection to a child who still believed the world was fair? Ellena's needles stilled, her gray eyes flicking toward me with a look that said she'd known this moment would come, and after a long pause she leaned forward, her voice steady as she said, "That's not a simple question, sweetheart, it's a grown-up mess, but I'll try to explain." Sigd tilted his head, frown creasing his small forehead, and Ellena continued, "Sometimes adults make mistakes, big ones, and they let fear guide them instead of love. Your mom's parents, my son and his wife, they were scared a long time ago when they learned she was going to have you. They worried about what people would say, about shame instead of joy, and in their fear they made the worst choice of all. They turned away." His popsicle stick clattered onto the step as he sat up straighter, eyes wide. "They were scared of me? But I was just a baby." His voice trembled, and my chest ached with a pain I thought I'd buried. Ellena reached out, cupping his sticky cheek in her palm, her voice firm. "No, darling, not of you, never of you. They just didn't know how to face their own fears. People can be blind to blessings when they're too busy worrying about whispers. But your mom chose differently. She chose you from the very start, and that's what matters most." He blinked, processing, his small hands curling into fists. "So they didn't want me." The wobble in his words nearly broke me, tears prickling hot at the edges of my eyes, and I wanted to scream that it wasn't true, that he was everything I had ever wanted. Elena's voice rose again, cutting through his pain like a bomb. "Listen to me, boy, you are loved, more than you can possibly know, by your mama, by me, and that's family, not just who you're born to but who sticks by you, who never leaves, and we're not going anywhere." He studied her, then me, and after a long silence his face softened, a spark of hope flickering back. "You'll always be here, right, Grandma?" "Always." Ellena ruffled his hair with a chuckle. "Always, kiddo, me and your mama both." He grinned then, gap-toothed and radiant, the kind of smile that could chase shadows away, and in that moment I realized he wasn't broken by the truth, he was strengthened by it. But when I turned back to the sink later, hands deep in soapy water, I let the tears slip down my cheeks, because hearing my son grapple with the same rejection that had nearly destroyed me reopened the wound. Yet Elena's words had soothed him the way mine never could, steady and unflinching. She had given him a truth that didn't shatter him but reminded him of the love he did have. After that day Sigd didn't bring it up again for a while. He channeled his restless energy into questions about stars and circuits, books and bugs. He spent hours sprawled on the living room rug sketching diagrams or dismantling flashlights, and Ellena and I watched with quiet awe as his mind stretched further every year. His teachers noticed too, calling him gifted, telling me he explained things in ways that helped other children learn. And I felt pride swell in me so fierce it threatened to drown out the old ache of my parents' absence. But in the quiet hours, when Sigd was asleep and the house settled into stillness, I would sometimes sit on the couch staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars I'd stuck on his ceiling, wondering if one day he would go looking for the grandparents who had turned their backs, and what I would say if he did. For now, though, the answer was simpler. We were 3, Ellena, me, and Sigd. And that was enough, more than enough, because though my parents had abandoned me, I had built a family stronger than their fear ever was, and every laugh from my son, every wise crack from my grandmother, was proof that love could stitch even the deepest wounds into something whole. By the time Sigd reached second grade, his curiosity had become a force of nature. Teachers pulled me aside during conferences with wide eyes and told me he had a gift, that he asked questions no one else thought of and explained answers in ways that helped half the class finally understand. Mrs. Larson, his science teacher, once said with a laugh, "He makes me feel like the student." And I walked home from that meeting with a pride that bubbled like champagne. Yet pride alone didn't pay bills. So I poured every ounce of myself into shifts at Rosie's Diner, that squat little building on the edge of town with cracked vinyl booths and grease-stained menus. I would wipe down counters until my hands ached, refill coffee for truckers who barely glanced up, and come home with pockets heavy only with loose change and crumpled dollar bills. Each night I emptied my apron into the old coffee can under my bed, the one scrawled with black marker that read Sigd's future. Sometimes it was just pennies, sometimes a 5, but every coin was hope stacked against hopelessness. Ellena teased me that I was turning miserly, but she also slipped in her own wrinkled bills from her pension, muttering for the boy, though she never admitted it out loud. Life settled into a rhythm: work, school, home. Until one muggy Thursday afternoon that rhythm cracked. I was midway through my shift, apron sagging with the weight of coffee pots, my body dragging from another sleepless night, when it happened. I was refilling a trucker's mug when dizziness washed over me and my foot caught the edge of a chair leg. The pot tipped, and hot coffee arced across the table, splattering papers, a phone, and worst of all, the lap of a man in a navy suit so crisp it practically shouted money. My face flamed as I stammered apologies, grabbing napkins, dabbing frantically. "I'm so sorry, sir, I'll pay for the cleaning, I'll fix it." Words tumbled faster than sense, but instead of yelling he just stared at me, his jaw tight, his blue eyes cool and unreadable. Then he said flatly, "I have a meeting in an hour, bring me something else to wear until this is fixed." Panic clawed at me. What could I possibly bring? But I ran all the way home, rifled through closets until I found Grandpa Earl's old corduroy jacket, brown and patched at the elbows, smelling faintly of pipe tobacco, shoved it into a bag and sprinted back. When I thrust it at him, breathless and embarrassed, he held it up, arched an eyebrow, then burst out laughing, a rich, unexpected sound that startled the whole diner. "Vintage," he said, slipping it on with surprising ease, the corduroy comically clashing with his tailored slacks. "You've got guts, I'll give you that." I muttered my name, Freya, cheeks burning, while he introduced himself simply as Lance. He left with his soggy briefcase, promising to settle up later, but I thought that was the end of it. That night Rosie herself pulled me aside, cigarette dangling from her lips, and grumbled that the man was no ordinary customer, that he was a developer sniffing around to buy up the block, including the diner, bulldoze it, and put in a strip mall. My stomach sank because Rosie's was more than my job, it was the backbone of my savings, the place that had kept us afloat for over a decade. And if Lance took it away, all those years of scrubbing floors and pocketing tips might vanish like smoke. The next day, when I ran into him again, I shoved his freshly dry-cleaned suit into his hands with a glare and told him flatly I didn't want his money. "You're just another land shark," I snapped. "People like me actually need this diner to survive." He looked at me strangely, his blue eyes narrowing, then tipped his head in a half nod and walked away without argument. I thought that was the last of him. But the following morning I walked into Rosie's to find every face turned toward me, grinning like fools. Rosie herself barreled out of the kitchen and rasped, "You're a miracle worker, Freya. That Lance guy called last night, said he's dropping the land deal, and won't touch this place unless you say yes to dinner with him." My jaw dropped because in 15 years since Owen walked away I had locked that door and thrown away the key. No flings, no dates, just work, my son and Ellena. Men meant trouble. I'd learned that the hardest way possible. And now this suit-wearing stranger was dangling my livelihood like bait. It reeked of games. I muttered to myself all day about his angle, but curiosity gnawed at me, and by evening I called him with a clipped voice. Fine. Dinner. But it's at the diner, my rules. 6 o'clock tomorrow. He agreed without hesitation. I hung up, my stomach twisted with dread and something else I didn't want to name. That night Ellena raised an eyebrow when I told her, knitting needles pausing mid-air. About time you let the world knock at your door again, she said dryly, and I rolled my eyes, insisting it wasn't like that, but inside I wasn't so sure. The next evening the diner was almost empty when Lance walked in, right on time. No navy suit this time, but a simple button-up and slacks that made him look less like a corporate predator and more like a man who could blend into Springfield without drawing stares. I sat waiting in a corner booth, still in my faded jeans and green t-shirt, apron balled up on the counter, my walls braced high. When he slid across from me, I didn't waste a second. "Before you get any ideas," I said, leaning forward. Elbows on the table. "I have a son I'm raising alone and an elderly grandmother I care for. If you're looking for a fling or someone without ties, I'm not it. If this is a game, you can leave now." My voice came out sharper than I meant, but I didn't regret it. His lips curved into a slow, amused smile. "Well, damn," he said softly. "I don't think I've ever been brushed off so elegantly. Usually women trip over themselves for my money or my charm. But you, Freya, you're different, and I like that." I narrowed my eyes, uncertain if he was mocking me, but he leaned back and added, "I'm not here to play games. You threw me off with that jacket stunt. No one's ever called me a land shark to my face and gotten away with it. It made me think twice about more than just the diner. It made me curious about you." Rosie dropped 2 plates in front of us, greasy burgers and crinkle fries, the kind of food I'd eaten 1,000 times but now felt like a test. And for a while we ate in silence, my guard refusing to drop even as his easy laugh slipped through my cracks. He asked simple questions about Springfield, about how long I'd worked at the diner. I kept answers short, wary, yet something in his steady attention unsettled me, like he was seeing past the armor I had worn for 15 years. Weeks passed, and to my own surprise he kept showing up, sometimes once a week, then twice, never pushy, always deliberate. One evening it was a bouquet of daisies from the farmer's market. Another time tickets to a matinee at the old theater. Once he suggested the county fair fireworks, and though I insisted on splitting the check and keeping things simple, I caught myself lingering over coffee longer than intended, smiling at his dry humor, letting the warmth of his presence seep into places I had kept cold for so long. Still I wrestled with doubt. Why me? Why now? What could a polished man like him want with a single mother whose life revolved around an old diner and a child's future scribbled onto a coffee can? I almost convinced myself to cut things off until one crisp October night when he shifted the ground under me again. We were finishing dinner at Rosie's, the jukebox creaking out a Patsy Cline tune for the first time in years, when he set down his fork and looked me square in the eye. His voice steady but soft. "Freya, I'd like to meet your son, and your grandmother too, if that's okay." The words froze me, ketchup smudging my fingers as I blinked at him. "Meet them? Why?" I demanded, suspicion lacing my voice. He shrugged lightly, a faint smile tugging his lips. "Because they're your people, and I've been spending time with you for months. It feels right to know the ones who matter most." My stomach twisted. For years I had built walls so high no man could breach them, and now this one was asking to step inside, into the messy sacred circle that was my entire world. I half expected to regret it immediately, but something in his gaze disarmed me, so I muttered a wary, "Okay, but don't expect anything more than a polite dinner." He nodded, unfazed, like he could wait as long as it took. The Saturday he arrived, I fussed around the house all morning, vacuuming the sagging couch, wiping down counters twice. Ellena raised her brows and teased that I was more nervous than a bride. I shot her a glare, but she just smirked. "You deserve this, girl," she murmured. At 3 sharp, Lance knocked, no suit this time but jeans and a flannel, a paper bag of apples in hand. "Thought these might go with dinner," he said with a grin, and Ellena took to him instantly, sitting him in the living room and launching into stories about how I'd been strong and stubborn since I was little. My cheeks burned as I tried to shush her, but Lance only chuckled, nodding with genuine interest. "I figured that out already," he said softly, and something in his tone made Ellena beam. Then the front door banged and Sigd burst in, sneakers caked with dirt, backpack swinging, his voice loud. Mom, we dissected a worm today, it was so gross. He stopped mid-step, spotting Lance. Who's this? Before I could answer, Lance leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and said warmly, I'm Lance, tell me something, how do worms move without legs? It's been a while since I cracked a science book. And just like that, Sigd lit up, his shyness evaporating. They've got bristles, seedy, and muscles that squeeze them along like a conveyor belt. He darted to his shelf, pulling down his shoebox of treasures, diagrams, bug guides, scraps of circuits. And for the next 40 minutes he chattered non-stop. While Lance listened, asked questions, nodded with real interest, his smile growing with every answer. I watched from the doorway, stunned, expecting awkwardness or retreat. Not this easy buzzing connection. And Ellena caught my eye from the kitchen with that gleam that said she saw more than I wanted to admit. When dinner ended, Lance thanked Ellena, ruffled Sig's hair, and promised to bring over more apples next time. And as the door shut behind him, I realized something I hadn't dared believe for years. Maybe, just maybe, letting someone in didn't mean losing everything again. Maybe it could mean gaining something I hadn't even known I needed. Spring in Springfield arrived like a slow unfurling, lilacs blooming along fences, the garden bursting with new green, and life in Ellena's house settling into something steady yet charged with an undercurrent I could no longer ignore. For months Lance had been part of our rhythm, dropping by with apples, joining us at the county fair, even fixing the squeaky back door without being asked, and though I fought against it, the walls I had built after Owen's betrayal and my parents' rejection had begun to crack. One quiet evening we sat on the veranda sipping coffee, Sigd tinkering with a robotics kit inside, the air thick with lilac perfume, when Lance shifted in his chair, setting down his mug with a nervous fidget I had never seen from him. He reached for my hand, his palm warm and calloused, and said in a voice steady but filled with weight, Freya, I want to marry you, spend the rest of my life with you and with Sigd. What do you say? The words thundered in my head. Marriage, me? The diner girl who had raised a child with nothing but grit and tips stuffed in a coffee can. I stared at him, my breath caught, and whispered, You're serious? He squeezed my fingers, blue eyes unwavering. Dead serious? A yes trembled on my lips, but caution, old and sharp, held me back, the scars of abandonment whispering that trusting again was dangerous, so I forced myself to say, I need time, let me think. He nodded, unfazed, like he could wait forever. But my heart thudded long after. He left. A week later he showed up with an envelope so thick it seemed to bulge with secrets. Ellena was peeling carrots for stew at the kitchen table. Sigd sprawled on the rug sketching gears, when Lance plopped the envelope in front of me with a grin that wouldn't quit. Go on, open it, he urged. Suspicion prickled through me as I slid out the papers, my eyes snagging on the letterhead of Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, and then on the words full tuition scholarship under Sigd Jensen. My throat closed. What is this? I whispered, stunned, and Lance leaned back in his chair, still grinning. It's his spot, locked in, for years of med school, paid up when he's ready. I've been working on it for months, calling in favors he's set. My head snapped up, eyes blazing. You what? Sigd perked up, his hazel eyes wide, while Ellena dropped her peeler with a clatter. Been working on it quietly, didn't want to jinx it, Lance said, laughter spilling out, but tears pricked my eyes as fury and gratitude tangled. I bolted to my room, dragged out the battered coffee can stuffed with 15 years of crumpled bills and pennies, and slammed it on the table, money spilling like confetti. Take it, I choked. You paid for this, not me, take it all. My voice cracked with anger, but Lance's smile softened, his laugh low. That's yours, Freya, every cent. I did this because I wanted to, not for a refund, not for a thank you, but because I believe in your son, and in you. Sigd's voice piped up in awe. Does this mean I'm going to be a doctor? And Ellena cackled with delight, clapping her hands, the room spinning with their voices, but inside I was trembling, torn between the instinct to push him away and the truth that he had just given Sigd a future I had only dreamed of. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the scattered bills from my coffee can, realizing they no longer represented fear but resilience, years of surviving without anyone's help, but now someone had stepped in, not to take control but to lift us higher. It terrified me as much as it thrilled me. Days later I had a plan. If Lance had shown me he was serious with a scholarship, I would answer in my own way, so I took every cent from the coffee can and commissioned a tailor in town to craft a jacket. Not just any jacket but one sharp and navy, as fine as the suits Lance wore, only with a corduroy collar stitched at the edge, a quiet nod to that chaotic first day when I spilled coffee on him and handed him Grandpa Earl's relic. When the jacket was finished I wrapped it in a sleek black box, tied with a silver ribbon, hiding it in my closet until the moment felt right. It came one quiet evening at Rosie's after closing, the diner dark except for the single light above our booth. I slid the box across the table, my hands shaking. "Open it," I whispered, and when he peeled back the ribbon and lifted the jacket his grin faltered into something softer, eyes glinting as he ran a hand over the corduroy collar. "Freya," he murmured, but I cut in, my voice thick with tears. "This is for you, for showing up, for giving Sigd what I couldn't, for proving that I can trust again. I was so scared to let anyone in, but you're real, thank you." He looked at me, eyes bright, jacket forgotten between us, and asked quietly, "So that's a yes?" I laughed through my tears, the word tumbling out like release. "Yes, Lance, it's a yes." And before I could second guess, he pulled me across the booth into his arms, the jacket crushed between us, and for the first time in decades I didn't fight the warmth flooding my chest. It wasn't a dream, it was ours, and I knew that this was not just about survival anymore, but about building a life where love, chosen and hard-earned, could finally flourish. Years slipped by and Sigd grew into the promise we had always seen in him, devouring his studies at Johns Hopkins with the same hunger he once had for flashlights and bug guides. By 22 he was already a surgeon, his hands steady under the harsh lights of operating rooms, his mind calm in moments where life and death hung by a thread, and every phone call home filled me with pride so fierce it erased years of doubt. Thanksgiving of that year I asked him to come home to Springfield. Ellena's brick house still standing sturdy, Lance carving the turkey with practiced ease, me bustling around in a plaid apron, silver streaking my hair but my grin still fierce, Ellena at 90 perched at the head of the table, sharp and mischievous as ever, telling stories that made Sigd laugh until tears rolled down his cheeks. The fire crackled in the hearth and for a moment it felt like life had finally come full circle, healed and whole. Then headlights swept across the yard, a battered pickup pulling into the drive. I stepped onto the porch expecting neighbors, maybe a delivery, but when the doors opened and I saw them climb out, my heart nearly stopped. Paul and Ellen, my parents, older now, faces weathered and streaked with tears, the same people who had once slammed a door in my face and told me to get out, standing there trembling, asking without words to be let back in. Behind me Lance appeared, steady and protective, and inside I could see Sigd's silhouette against the warm glow of the dining room, the grandson they had never known. My chest tightened as memories of that night long ago flooded back, the gravy spilled, the duffel bag, the bitter wind as I walked away. But here they were, broken and pleading. Paul's voice cracked first. "Freya, I'm so sorry, I've missed you every damn day, we were fools, scared and stupid, please let me fix it." Ellen's sobs followed. "We were wrong, you've built a beautiful family, and your son, your boy, he's incredible. I hate that we missed it all, please forgive us." The yard seemed to hold its breath, my tears hot against the icy air. Years of silence pressing down like a weight. Behind me I felt Sigd's hand on my arm, his voice quiet but firm. "Mom, do you know them?" I swallowed hard, forcing the words out. "Meet your grandparents." And the shock on his face cut me to the bone. Paul stepped forward, eyes wet. "Grandson, we're family, you've got to know that." But Sigd's jaw tightened, his hazel eyes blazing like mine had years ago. "My family is right here, my mom, my grandma, and my dad who raised me, that's who never left." His arm tightened around me as if to anchor me against the storm. Ellena's cane tapped against the porch as she appeared in the doorway, her voice still sharp despite her frailty. "You had decades to come back, decades to apologize, and you chose tonight. Don't expect forgiveness to be handed to you like pie on a plate." The silence was heavy, broken only by the crackle of fire inside. Finally I spoke, my voice low but steady. "Sorry is a start, but it's not enough, not yet, not after what you did." And with that I turned toward the door, holding it open just wide enough. "You can come in for tea, but that's all, the rest will take time." Paul and Ella nodded, tears streaking their cheeks as they shuffled forward. And as I followed them inside, Lance's hand brushed mine, grounding me while Sigd whispered, "We'll figure it out, Mom." And in that fragile moment, surrounded by the warmth of the only real family I had ever known, I realized forgiveness might one day be possible, but it would be on my terms, not theirs.